give you a little bit of an idea of how my week has gone. Well, we have the only car, so if there's any equipment to be moved, I'm involved in moving it. So we've been getting things together for conference, and then my boss decides he wants some help with a document, and I spend all night working on a document for him. And then we have to set up here, and it's just one thing after another. And here I've got a message to prepare for. Well, God's given me a little bit to talk about today. This was not the order things were supposed to go, so I've been scrambling a lot. And I do have a word from God. I do believe that this is what God wants me to talk about. God's just going to have to help develop it as I go, because I haven't had a whole lot of time to put the normal amount of study in that I typically do. I want to talk to you about spiritual authority through unity. Spiritual authority through unity. I've had the privilege during my life to be involved in the leadership of multiple organizations, both in business and in the church. And I've also made a point of observing and studying leaders and leadership concepts because I want to be a good leader. Samuel, go ahead and take me completely out of the monitors. Maybe that'll help you. And I noticed a familiar flaw in almost every organization that I have been involved in. It's easy to spot, but incredibly difficult to overcome. In fact, I would say almost impossible to overcome. Anybody know what that problem that I know you've seen it because you've all been involved in groups. That flaw is quite simply, we are people. We're people. We have emotion, we have ideas, we have conflict, we have challenges. Because God has given each one of us the ability to think, to plan, to desire. But animals have the same traits. The only difference is they lack the ability to organize beyond their inherent nature. Now, what do you mean? What do I mean by that? Well, think about an ant. The ant crawling on the ground today in the forest acts exactly like the ant that was on the boat with Noah. No change. But look what humanity has done. The fact that we have a conference here and have a speaker on the video and things like that happened because humanity has the ability to go beyond and to incorporate other people's talents. Take this meeting example. Sister Glenda and Sister Rachel worked on getting the decoration set up and deciding where everything should sit. Pastor Candace and Sister Glenda and the printing company made the banner outside. Samuel and I worked on the audio and the video, mostly Samuel, but I did help a little bit. Others have fulfilled other responsibilities. You see, it's been a team effort, and that is unique to humanity because we can do something beyond just the need for protection, sustenance, and procreation. Let's go to the Bible. Israel leaves Egypt. Most people estimate, because they only in the Bible record the number of men, most people estimate there were probably at least 1.5 million people that exited Egypt. That is a big group of people. You know how many leaders were in that group of people? 1. Moses was the leader. Everyone looked to Moses. And even though he had shepherded them through the Red Sea and had brought them on the way to Sinai, he was stretched so thin that his father-in-law had to bring his wife and kids to him. Think about that. I can't do much without my wife. But Moses was stretched so thin that he had even neglected to pay attention to his kids and his wife. They had been with their grandfather. Now, Jethro was a prince and a priest, so he knew a little bit about organization. And Exodus 18 gives us the narration where he arrives from camp, and I'm just going to summarize it. Jethro brings Moses' family, and while he's observing Moses in action, he makes some observations. The morning starts with a line outside Moses' door. And the day ends with a line outside Moses' door. Because everyone's coming to Moses for the answers. And Jethro says, "What are you doing?" And Moses answers, "The people need guidance, and I give it to them." I mean, he was trying to do his best. Let's go to Exodus 18, 17 through 22. Exodus chapter 18, verse 17 says, "And Moses' father-in-law said unto him, The thing that thou doest is not good. Thou wilt surely wear away both thou and this people that is with thee, for this thing is too heavy for thee. Thou art not able to perform it thyself alone. Hearken now unto my voice. I will give thee counsel, and God shall be with thee. Be thou for the people to Godward, that thou mayest bring the causes unto God. And thou shalt teach them ordinances and laws, and shalt show them the way wherein they must walk, and the work that they must do. Moreover, thou shalt provide out of all the people able men, such as fear God, men of truth, hating covetousness, place such over them to be rulers of thousands, rulers of hundreds, rulers of 50s, and rulers of 10s. And let them judge the people in all seasons. And it shall be that every great matter they shall bring unto thee, but every small matter they shall judge. So shall it be easier for thyself, and they shall bear the burden with thee." So, wonderful advice, right? Moses implemented the structure, and he probably felt the immediate relief as the chosen leaders began to carry the burden along with him. Here's an interesting point. Moses, it's not recorded anywhere that Moses prayed about this. He simply did it. We move forward in the order of events. Exodus chapter 19 through 23, God speaks the law to the people at Sinai. 24 through 31, Moses ascends to the mountain and receives the tablets of stone plus the plans for the tabernacle. In chapter 32, the very leaders established in chapter 18 go to Aaron, one of the guys Moses put in charge, and says, "Give us gods to worship, because we don't know what happened to Moses." Do you realize that in less than 2 months, they made one of the biggest blunders in their leadership career by trying to lead the people away from God? Think about that. Less than 2 months. And they're sitting there watching the thunder and the lightning and the earthquakes happening on Sinai, knowing that that's exactly how God spoke to them just a month or so earlier. Think about that. About a year later, Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, decides it's time for him to go home. And at this time, they arrive at a place called Taberah. Now, we mostly remember Taberah because this is where God got angry with them because they're complaining over the manna and says, "I'll give you quail." And quail about that deep shows up the next morning. So much that while they're eating it, they literally vomit it up because they eat so much. But there's a much more significant event that occurred at Taberah. Let's go to Numbers chapter 11, verse 30 verse 1. It's going to be long reading of verse 30. I'm going to read and talk about while I go through. Now, remember, we're about a year away from Sinai. So they left Egypt less than a year and a half ago. Now, when the people complained, it displeased the Lord, and the Lord heard it, and his anger was kindled, and the fire of the Lord burned among them and consumed them that were in the uttermost parts of the camp. Talking about the complaining about eating manna, eating angels' foods. And I'm not talking about angel that we have here. I'm talking about the spiritual type. I was thinking there this morning, it's good to have an angel in the congregation. And verse 2, and the people cried unto Moses, and when Moses prayed unto the Lord, the fire was quenched. So God's answering prayer. And he called the name of the place Taberah, because the fire of the Lord burnt among them. And the mixed multitude that was among them fell a-lusting, and the children of Israel also wept again and said, who shall give us flesh to eat? We remember the fish that we did eat in Egypt freely, and the cucumbers and the melons and the leeks and the onions and garlic. But now our soul is dried away. There's nothing at all besides this manna before our eyes. And the manna was as coriander seed, and the color thereof the color of bdellium. And the people went about and gathered it, and ground it in mills, and beat it in a mortar, and baked it in pans, and made cakes of it. And the taste of it was the taste of fresh oil. And when the dew fell upon the camp in the night, the manna fell upon it. And then Moses heard the people weep throughout their families, every man in the door of his tent, and the anger of the Lord was kindled greatly. Moses also was displeased. Now listen to verse 11. And Moses said unto the Lord, wherefore hast thou afflicted thy servant, and wherefore have I not found favor in thy sight, that thou layest the burden of all this people upon me? Have I conceived all these people? Have I begotten them? That thou shouldest say unto me, carry them in thy bosom, as a nursing father beareth the suckling child, unto the land which thou swearest unto their fathers. Now there's so many problems with what Moses is saying there. First of all, I've never seen a nursing father. You know, so he's complaining. He's just, God, why am I stuck with this? Verse 13, when should I have flesh to give unto all these people? For they weep unto me, saying, give us flesh that we may eat. I am not able to bear all these people alone, because it is too heavy for me. Now, wait a minute. What happened in chapter 18 of Exodus? He developed all kinds of leaders. But now he's saying, I'm carrying all these people alone. If thou deal thus with me, kill me. I pray thee out of hand. I've felt that way a couple times in my life. If I have found favor in thy sight, let me not see my wretchedness. And the Lord said unto Moses, gather unto me 70 men of the elders of the Israel, whom thou knowest to be the elders of the people, and the officers over them, and bring them unto the tabernacle of congregation, that they may stand there with thee. And I will come down and talk with thee there, and I will take of the Spirit which is upon thee, and I will put it upon them, and they shall bear the burden of the people with thee, and that thou bear it not thyself alone. And say thou unto the people, sanctify yourselves again tomorrow, and ye shall eat flesh, for ye have wept in the ears of the Lord, saying, who shall give us flesh to eat? For it was well with us in Egypt. Therefore the Lord will give you flesh, and ye shall eat. You shall not eat it 1 day, nor 2 days, nor 5 days, neither 10 days, nor 20 days, but even a whole month, until it come out of your nostrils, and it be loathsome unto you, because ye have despised the Lord, which is among you, and have wept before him, saying, why came ye forth out of Egypt? So, God says, take 70 men, and I will put part of the Spirit that I have placed upon you upon them. So God said, pick 70 men. He had already divided things up into thousands, hundreds, and tens earlier. Why the difference? Well, first of all, he actually prayed about it. And God gave him direction. So you have to think that when he's picking these 70 men, he's listening to God and saying, is this one you want me to choose? Is this one you want me to choose? But still, God said to pick them. So God did not, as he did when he was giving him the blueprints for the tabernacle, he didn't say, now choose this man to do this, because he said that. He said, I put the gifts in this man, use him. That's not what he said. He said, pick the people. Pick 70. Now here's what's interesting. Anyone ever heard of the Sanhedrin? I just read to you the origin of the Sanhedrin. 70 men plus one, being Moses, makes 71 men. The Sanhedrin, the great Sanhedrin, was always 71 men. This is where it started. Why? Because God said do it. And that's where we have to start. We have to say, choose the ones that God leads us to. We have to work with the ones that God leads us to. And then there's another key. And that key is that God will take His Spirit and He will place it upon them. Think about that. It's not their own spirit, but they become a part of the greater plan. You see, there is no authority without unity. I could take you to the New Testament where the centurion comes to Jesus. Says, can you please heal my servant? And Jesus says, yeah, I'll come to your house. And the centurion said, no. You see, I'm a man under authority. And when I say go, someone goes. And when I say come, someone comes. You ever really studied the structure of that sentence? He didn't say, I am someone who has authority. He says, I'm one under authority. Think about that. You see, he understood that his authority came from the fact that he was unified with the purpose of Caesar, his emperor. That's where authority came from. He also understood that the moment he stepped out from underneath that authority, or maybe he said something that displeased Caesar, Caesar would call one of his soldiers and say, kill him. And they would, because their loyalty was to the greater cause, which was the kingdom. So spiritual authority comes from unity of purpose. If things are not happening in a group, if things are not happening in a life, the first place you look is, how am I living under my authority? Am I unified in purpose? Now, unified, if I could get Nathaniel and I could hold his hand and we could walk across the front of this auditorium and we would be unified in purpose, crossing the auditorium. But you know, there's no way that Nathaniel could match my footsteps. Unity does not mean unison. Okay? Unity means you got the same purpose, you got the same goal, and you're working together to achieve it. And that is the only place where spiritual authority can come from. I look back at my life and I realize that the times when my life was the worst was when I was having difficulty with those in authority over me. I can lay it out. You bring a moment in my life where I'm having a hard time or I'm struggling, I can point to you where I was having a problem with my authority. Every time. Because authority comes with unity. Let's get back into the Bible. And verse 21, and Moses said to the people, among whom am I? Are 600,000 footmen that thou hast said, I will give them flesh that they may eat for the whole month? Shall the flocks and the herds be slain for them to suffice them? And shall the fish of the sea be gathered together for them to suffice them? You see, Moses is still looking for a human solution. And the Lord said unto Moses, is the Lord's hand waxed short? Thou shalt see now whether my word shall come to pass unto thee or not. And Moses went out and told the people the words of the Lord, and gathered the 70 men of the elders of the people, and set them round about the tabernacle. And the Lord came in a cloud and spake unto him, and took of the Spirit that was upon him, and gave it to the 70 elders. And it came to pass that when the Spirit rested upon them, they prophesied and did not cease. Again, it was the Spirit that was on Moses that he distributed to the people. You may say, I'm full of God. I got a spirit. I speak in tongues more than y'all, like Paul did. But if you don't have the spirit of your leader, then there's going to be challenges coming. And here's another point, verse 26. And there remained 2 of the men in the camp. One was Eldad, and the name of the other was Medad. So Moses picks the 70 and says, come to the tabernacle. 68 show up. 2 stay home. Doesn't say why. Maybe they didn't feel like they were worthy. I don't know. It's obvious that they weren't in rebellion because God wouldn't have included them. But 2 of them stayed home. The Spirit rested upon them, and they were of them that were written, but went not into the tabernacle. They prophesied in the camp. Then, and there ran a young man and told Moses and said, Eldad and Medad do prophesy in the camp. And Joshua the son of Nun, the servant of Moses, one of his young men, answered and said, my Lord Moses, forbid them. And Moses said to him, enviest thou for my sake? Would God that all the Lord's people were prophets, and that the Lord would put his Spirit upon them. And Moses gathered him into the camp, he and the elders of Israel. So here are 2 men that they obviously were part of the chosen, but they chose not to come. Maybe they felt like they weren't worthy. The Bible doesn't say, and I'm not going to try and make something out of the Bible, something the Bible doesn't say. But God's Spirit went on them anyway. You see, many times I may not realize what's happening to me. You may not realize what's happening to you. And you may not feel like you're part of the team. But if you're part of the team in unity, then God's Spirit can come and rest upon you. You see, my pastor taught me something very early on in my ministry. I felt that I was called in the ministry, and he asked me, he said, not yet, you don't need to get your license yet. I said, okay. Come to me a little bit later, I really think that I need to get my license. Well, is there anything that your license is keeping, or not having license is keeping you from doing? I said, no, I'm doing everything I feel like I'm supposed to do. He said, don't worry about it. Not yet. Okay. You see, he had a principle that he lived by. And that is that a person's gift will make place for the person. The person's gift will open doors for the person. And it happened. Our children began to grow up, and as they grew, they began to ask questions. And we realized that nobody was answering the questions that my kids were asking. So we start answering the questions because we wanted our children to always have the answers that they wanted. And we got to talk and said, if my kids are asking these questions, then so-and-so's kids will be asking the same questions, and so-and-so kids. And that's how we got started with the children's ministry, because no one at church was doing what needed to be done. And our gift made a door for us. But I can tell you why that door was opened. You see, my pastor, when we came to him, told him what we felt we needed to start doing with the children. He said, I'll back you on one condition. Every lesson you write, bring it to me before you teach it. I want to read it. Write your lesson out, bring it to me before you teach it. You see, he was making me accountable to him. And I willingly did it. In fact, I encouraged other people to take the same tack. And I saw where many people, in fact, there was one service, at this time our church was running about 300. There was one service that the pastor called everyone forward that was called to ministry. 21 people lined up across the front of the church. But out of those 21, pastor could only count on about 5 or 6. He'd go to them and say, so-and-so needs Bible study. Will you teach them Bible study? Oh, no, Pastor, I don't teach Bible study. But can I preach next Wednesday night? I don't teach Bible study. Don't ask me to pick somebody up for church. But can I preach on Sunday? And the obvious answer was no. Because they weren't aligned with my pastor's purpose, with my pastor's vision. And it's through that authority. Because you see, I was able to do things that others weren't able to do. Why? Because I can tell you the worst night of my 10 years we were there, vividly in my mind, the worst night of my 10 years. I was on the church board. We had a great meeting, getting things accomplished. Pastor dismisses the meeting and he looks at me and says, Brother Alphin, let's go get a cup of coffee. Immediately I went, something's wrong. Very gentle in his conversation. But you see, I had done something that did not align with his vision. And because I did not align with his vision, he knew that my ministry would suffer. And he brought me back into alignment. He said, and in fact, he admitted, he said, there's nothing wrong with what you're doing, but it's not the right way to do it. This is what you should have done. Vividly, I could take you to the table at the restaurant where we drank coffee, because my number one goal had always been to align with my pastor's vision. My number one goal. He had seen things in me that no one else had seen. He had helped me. He had guided me. But he would only do it if it fit the vision of the church. The other guys, the other 15 or so people, they eventually backslid or moved to another church or something because they didn't want to align with the pastor's vision. We got 5.5 million people to reach. We've got to be unified. Got to be unified. I can go back to the New Testament and talk about a young man that was demon possessed. As he has this condition, there's people that want to help him. So they get together. They had done these things before, and they had practiced it, and they evidently were known for this. And they get together and they go to this man's house. And as they're working with this young man and they're praying with this young man, the Spirit speaks. And he says, Paul I know, and Jesus I know. But who are you? You see, Paul was aligned with Jesus' vision. So he was very well known as an enemy of the demonic world. But the 7 sons of Sceva wound up getting trounced by one man because they didn't want to line up with the apostolic doctrine. They didn't want to line up with Christianity. And they had no power. They had no spiritual authority because they weren't unified with the purpose of our Bible. It's spiritual authority is something that really is hard to talk about, especially as a leader. Because as a leader talks, many people begin to think, well, he's just doing that because he's not getting his way or this or that. It's really not that. You see, I want everyone to be part of the 71. I do. Because that's the only way we're going to reach the 5.5 million people here in Finland. It takes everyone. But neither do I want Nadabs and Abihus in my group. Because God generally deals with them rather harshly. They had a good idea. They thought they were doing the right thing. It was time to light the candle. They needed fire to light the candle, so they grabbed fire and they go light the candle. The only problem was they hadn't offered any repentance yet. Because that's what the altar of sacrifice represents, is repentance. They hadn't gone by there. Because our repentance is what fuels our worship. But spiritual authority, what you have to understand is just like respect is earned, and just like trust is earned, I can't demand someone respect me. And I can't demand somebody trust me. I might demand that they do X, Y, and Z, and because I have enough power to force them to do it, they'll do it. But that's not respect, and that's not trust. That's servitude. And the Bible is not built, the kingdom is not built on forced servitude. So trust and respect have to be earned. That means that if you trust me, you chose to trust me. If you respect me, you chose to respect me. But here's the problem. Spiritual authority also can't be given. I can't give you spiritual authority. I would if I could. Spiritual authority comes from unity. And the minute I step out from the unity of my leadership, I remove the protection in my life. And I lose the ability to fight in the spirit realm. Oh, I may have a good time praying. I may speak in tongues for hours. But all I'm doing is generating an adrenaline hit. I'm not accomplishing anything because I'm not aligned. Life is challenging. It really is. You know, I have people who give me direction, and they probably think about me an hour every month. If I'm causing a problem, or they think that I'm causing a problem, they may think about me. Otherwise, they're so busy, they probably might mention me in prayer, but that's about it. And they make decisions that I scratch my head on sometimes. But that's not the point. The point is, I have to be unified with them. I have to follow the purpose that they put in my life. Because as I said, when I step out of that, I feel it. I immediately feel it in my prayer life. I feel it in my real life, my everyday life. I guess it's all my real life, but my everyday life. Because when I step out of my authority structure, temptations come my way much stronger. You know, it's much harder for me to control my flesh. And I don't accomplish near what I should be accomplishing for the kingdom. You see, the gifts, they're there. The gifts are available at all times. I've operated in all 9. I know I'm comfortable. But I can give you names of people who have operated the gifts but been in a backslidden state. Because once God gives the gift, He doesn't take it away. But the minute they lose their authority, they may be able to do the mechanics, but they can't fight in the spirit realm. We got to fight in front of us. Brother Rodrigo, there are several thousand Spanish-speaking people in this country. They need Jesus. Filipinos, there's a huge Filipino contingent in this country. They need Jesus. The Finns, we got to figure out how to break into the Finnish people. They need Jesus. They need Jesus. We even need to reach the Swedes, Johannes. Even the Swedes. You know? But we can't do it if we're not unified. Otherwise, we'll just be like the 7 sons of Sceva. Do you realize that Sceva was one of the Aaronic priesthood? So these guys should have had the credentials to do what they wanted to do. But they weren't unified with the purpose of God. We all stand. I'm sure things will be far better as we go forward in this conference. I had the heavy message to share because I'm the keynote, and I want to make sure we are all marching to the same drum, things like that. But you see, it doesn't matter if I'm speaking, if Brother Pelham would have been here, Brother Kelly would have been here. It doesn't matter. What matters is that we align with the purpose of Christ. It's that purpose where we find our peace, where our unity comes from, where our protection comes from. See, most of the time, most people use, when we talk about authority, we call it an umbrella of authority. And when people think that, they think, well, you got a small top at the umbrella, and you got a big umbrella, and you got a lot of people under the authority. That's not why we use the umbrella as an example of authority. In the business world, I had quite a bit of freedom in making decisions. And I made a decision once that cost the company a lot of money. But because I was operating under the umbrella of authority, when the big boss came to my boss and said, "You need to do something about this," my boss took the heat because I was working under his direction. You see, that's the value of the umbrella. It protects. It protects. Anybody like to walk in the rain? I mean, a cold May rain where it just goes all the way to the bones. Anybody enjoy that? Wouldn't you much rather have an umbrella to protect you? Lord, I love you. I shared what you asked me to, Lord.